So in 2001, George Bush declared the U.S. War on Terror, and nearly 20 years later, where are we today? And I know a lot of people, myself included, like to bring up the human toll of this war on terror and the disastrous effect it's had. I mean, the Iraq War alone, 200,000 civilians, and that's the conservative number. One aspect I feel like that has been really overlooked in talking about the war on terror has been the refugee crisis that is created. And in this new piece by Jacobin, Daniel Bessner has a really interesting article about the U.S. war on terror has created at least 37 million refugees. So we're going to kind of go over the piece. I'll link it in the description below, and you guys can also follow along. So last week, Brown University's Cost of War project released a report that revealed a startling statistic. Since George W. Bush's initiation of the global war on terror, at least 37 million people have fled their homes as a result of the 8 most violent wars the U.S. military has launched or participated in. This a staggering number, 37 million people. And, we'll go a little deeper into these numbers. The intervention in Afghanistan has resulted in 5.3 million displaced people, Pakistan 3.7 million, Iraq 9.2 million, Libya 1.2 million, Syria 7.1 million, Yemen 4.4 million, Somalia 4.2 million, and the Philippines 1.7 million. These numbers are more than those displaced by any other war or disaster since the start of the 20th century, with the sole exception of World War II. And so, obviously, World War II, a uniquely devastating war that displaced millions of people. But this war on terror is the most devastating thing. Besides that, the since the 20th century began, that's crazy. The 37 million figure is also a conservative estimate. The total number might be as high as 59 million. Now, obviously, that is the high range. I think that I usually like to talk about what the conservative number is. That's why with the Iraq War, I always say 200,000 civilians because, some estimates have it as high as a million civilians. But I think that it's important that we use the conservative numbers because even these conservative numbers are devastating. So 37 million. So then the piece kind of describes how the U.S. has responded to this because the U.S. has been directly obviously involved. Now, it's important to remember the U.S. isn't the sole reason for all these refugees, but we have been very, very involved in these crises. Unsurprisingly, the United States has done little to aid those it has separated from their homes since the fiscal year 2002. The government has only allowed in about 950,000 refugees. Put it another way, in absolute numbers, the United States has welcomed just 2.5% of the 37 million people it has displaced, though it's through its military misadventures, a pathetic amount, especially for an incredibly wealthy nation that has chosen to govern the world and which is therefore responsible for its state. And so I feel like that's a super important point to make. There is this mindset that we are the governors of the world, the police force, the world police force, that we have to go and stop these dictators despite the fact that we support the majority of the world's dictators. But just this idea that it's up to us to take care of all these different issues around the world when we actually make things worse. But so it's like if we are making things worse, then it should be on us to take care of these things. And the fact that we've taken in so few refugees is a problem. And I know that there's people that say that we've taken in way too many refugees. I completely disagree, though, when you see these numbers. And people will say, like, oh, like, what duty is it of mine? It is our country that is largely responsible for a lot of these refugees. Not the sole reason, but we are a huge reason. So, the article also describes what should be done. One of the most exciting elements of Bernie Sanders' run for president was how he centered non-Americans. According to Sanders' campaign, his administration intended not only to aid people in the United States, but also to change the terms of the global economy to lift up workers everywhere. So this is something actually I think is really important, and it's something that Michael Brooks used to talk about all the time. Was the need for what does a left foreign policy look like? Because we have seen so much right-wing foreign policy in the U.S. I mean, that's since its inception, really. That has been the dominant faction of U.S. foreign policy has been right-wing foreign policy. But what would left-wing foreign policy look like? We got a sneak peek of that with Bernie Sanders' run for president, and I think that it's really important that we don't lose sight of that. This idea that where we don't just look at like, oh, U.S.-centered issues, that we look on foreign policy, because the U.S. has a disproportionate impact on the rest of the world. Whether we like it or not, we do. Our policies impact the rest of the world. And so I think that it was so important that Bernie Sanders centered not only U.S. workers, but workers all around the world and just people all around the world. So this human message, which recognizes all people as worthy and worthy of respect and dignity, regardless of where they were born, must remain central to any left-wing project and must explicitly connected to the disasters wrought by U.S. imperialism. Americans have a responsibility to those whose lives our government so carelessly destroyed. With the climate crisis escalating, we should also expect a sharp increase in refugees fleeing the global south. Here, too, we have an enormous responsibility. This is also so true. I mean, whenever we have these issues, refugees also, but like the climate change that impacts the people at the bottom first. Those are the people who feel it the hardest. They're the ones who feel it first, and we are going to see a surplus of people fleeing the global south because of climate change. And this is another thing where it's like I know that people don't some people don't like it, but it's like there is a responsibility the US has to these issues. And it's honestly, this is just something that we should care about even if you don't feel a responsibility. These are people, these are actual lives. People who have been displaced. Now, I think it is also worth noting, it's not in this piece, but I dug a little deeper into the actual report. I think 25 million of those refugees that have been displaced have either been able to return home or found some other sort of secure home. So it was 25 million of the 37 million. I might have that number slightly off, but that's roughly where it was. So that leaves, what is that? 7 million, or no, I'm sorry, 12 million that are still without place, that weren't able to return home or found some sort of new secure place to live. And that is devastating. That is truly devastating. This is all coming from the U.S. war on terror. Like I said, not the sole reason that this is happening, but it is a very, very big reason that it's happening. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys just kind of take this information and use it when we are talking about where the left needs to go when it comes to foreign policy, that we center issues like this, the refugee crisis, because it's so common when we talk about the war on terror to just talk about the deaths from the war, just because, I mean, also devastating. You could have a whole nother article about the devastating numbers of people who have died because of the war on terror. But the refugee crisis is very real, and it's something that we should take pretty seriously, in my opinion. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you disagree with anything I said, or if I got anything wrong, please leave a comment down below. If you have any ideas of your own of where you feel like the left needs to move in terms of foreign policy, because there's really it's pretty big. There's no one that I've seen, at least, with a super cohesive vision of what a left-wing foreign policy needs to look like. So if you have any, in your own mind where you think it should go, please comment down that down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great day.